You want to recite Quran? You want to recite Quran? Come on. Yeah. Per Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali.
صلوات. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا أقسم بهذا البلد وأنت حل بهذا البلد ووالد وما ولد وأنت حل بهذا البلد ووالد وما ولد لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد أيحسب أن لن يقدر عليه أحد يقول أهلكت مالا لبدا أيحسب أن لم يره أحد ألم نجعل له عينين ولسانا وشفتين وهديناه النجدين فلقطعم العقبة وما أدراك ما العقبة فك رقبة أو إطعام في يوم ذي مسغبة يتيما ذا مقربة أو إطعام في يوم ذي مسغبة يتيما ذا مقربة أو مسكينا ذا متربة ثم كان من الذين آمنوا وتواصوا بالصبر وتواصوا بالمرحمة أولئك أصحاب الميمنة والذين كفروا بآياتنا هم أصحاب المشأمة عليهم نار مؤصدة صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Jazakallah khair, brother. One more loud salawat for him. At this time, I'd like to invite Brother Abbas Maklai for recitation of poetry with the loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات. پانی نہیں مانگوں گی، ہرگز نہیں روں گی، امو میرے آ جاؤ. پانی نہیں مانگوں گی، ہرگز نہیں روں گی، امو میرے آ جاؤ. برتا ہے شمر لے کر ہاتھوں میں ایک خنجر، بابا ہے زمین پر اور ہے سجدے مشک کا سر. کس طرح سے بابا کو ظالم سے بچاؤں گی، امو میرے آ جاؤ. پانی نہیں مانگوں گی، ہرگز نہیں روں گی، امو میرے آ جاؤ. اب بھی ہے لہو جاری، دیکھو میرے کانوں سے، دامن بھی جلا ہے اور رخ سارے یہ نیلے، اس دل کے یہ غم سارے میں تم کو بتاؤں گی، امو میرے آ جاؤ. پانی نہیں مانگوں گی، ہرگز نہیں روں گی، امو میرے آ جاؤ. ایک اونتے سے ریتی پر گر گر کے میں اوتی ہوں، اور شمر کے دورے بھی میں پشتے پہ کھاتی ہوں. بن تیرے سفر کے سے اس دھوپ میں کاٹوں گی، امو میرے آ جاؤ. پانی نہیں مانگوں گی، ہرگز نہیں روں گی، امو میرے آ جاؤ. مانگا ہے مجھے امو ظالم نے کنیزی میں، گھبراتی ہوں میں لیکن پابند ہوں رسی میں، کس طرح سے ظالم سے میں خود کو چھپاؤں گی، امو میرے آ جاؤ. پانی نہیں مانگوں گی، ہرگز نہیں روں گی، امو میرے آ جاؤ. پانی نہیں مانگوں گی، ہرگز نہیں روں گی، امو میرے آ جاؤ. بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات.
Jazakallah khair, brother. At this time, I'd like to invite Brother Ayan for recitation of poetry with Allah salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات. سکائے سکینہ عباس سکینہ عباس عباس زینب کا سہارا عباس عباس سقائے سکینہ عباس عباس گالوں پہ تماچے یوں ہی کھاتی تھی سکینہ رو رو کے فقط تم کو بلاتی تھی سکینہ آ جاؤ خدا را عباس عباس سقائے سکینہ عباس عباس تم تھے میری چادر کے محافظ میرے بھیا تم سو گئے میدان میں میرا چھن گیا پردہ سر کھل گیا میرا عباس عباس سقائے سکینہ عباس عباس اور سنتی ہوں کہ دریا پہ ہوا قبضہ تمہارا اے بھیا مگر خیموں تلک پانی نہ آیا پیاسی ہے سکینہ عباس عباس اور شبیر کا سر پشت سے جب کاٹا گیا تھا خنجر کے تلے بھائی نے 2 بار کہا تھا آؤ میرے بھیا عباس عباس سقائے سکینہ عباس عباس اللہ کسی کو بھی دکھائے نہ یہ منظر بے پردہ بہن بھائی کا سر نو کے سنا پر اور بھائی بھی ایسا عباس عباس سقائے سکینہ عباس عباس بر محمد و آل محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Ayan. One more last salawat for him. Brothers and sisters, respected Sheikh, Assalamu alaikum. Condolences to the Imam of our time for the demise of his great-grandfather, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. Before I request the Sheikh to ascend the member to honor us with his speech for tonight, I would like to request a Surah Fatiha for Marhum Mohsen Maklai and for all of the Marhumin and Mominat of the Maklai and Alidina families. At this time, I'd like to request Sheikh to ascend the member to honor us with a speech tonight and request the brothers and sisters to move as close to the member as possible with the loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Brothers, please move as close to the member as possible. There's a plenty of space up here.
Recite salawat, please. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. استغفر ربي وأتوب إليه. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الهمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا أجل ممدود. أما بعد، فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. For the love of our beloved Prophet and his beloved progeny, a second loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. For the hastening in the return of our beloved 12th Imam, a third final loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. First and foremost, we want to take some time to offer our condolences on the martyrdom of our beloved sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil faraja. One of those things that we find in the lives of our dear Ma'asumeen, that we are blessed with the opportunity to recognize them and acknowledge them as role models for us, and individuals who speak on behalf of the prophets and live the lifestyle of the prophets, is that each of these 14 Ma'asumeen came to us in a different era, in a different time, and their situations and the circumstances that they were dealing with were quite different from one another. And the reality is, because they came at different times with different situations, different enemies, different friends even, the tests that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in front of them and the obstacles that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed in their lives and the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted them to be patient with were quite different from each other. If you were to list the 14 Ma'asumeen and list the type of tests that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested them with, you'll find that the tests vary very much between them. If you start from the Holy Prophet Muhammad al-Mustafa salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. You find during his time, of course, the test was a group of Muslims who had come together, a community that was forming against a non-Muslim community who was not neutral. They had animosity towards this Muslim community. They were violating the rights of this Muslim community. And this was the test of the prophets. If you wanted to essentially summarize the test of the Prophet in one word, you could call that test, for the most part, Quraysh. This was the test of the Prophet. Of course, there were many other tests that he went through, but this was probably the most prominent of them. 10 years in Medina and multiple battles, Quraysh is knocking on the door of the Prophet over and over again, with thousands of troops and thousands of soldiers. But immediately when you move on to the next of the Ma'asumeen, you find the time is different, the circumstances are different, the tests that the next Ma'asumeen are going through, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking them to be patient all of a sudden changes. When you go from the Prophet to the first Imam, immediately you find that things have changed, so much so that the first Imam, in some of his khutbahs, he talks about this. He says, when the Prophet was alive, it was Muslim versus non-Muslim who wanted to violate our rights, who was attacking us. But immediately afterwards, things changed. All of a sudden, it was Muslims against another group of Muslims who claimed to believe in the same Islam, in the same faith. You move on from the life of the first Imam to the second Imam, all of a sudden things are different again. All of a sudden a peace treaty comes into the picture. And the Imam has to make a difficult decision, one that even some of his own companions objected to. You move on from there to the third Imam, all of a sudden he is taught and he is told that he has to go to the battlefield and him and his family have to be slaughtered in the battlefield. And you move on to the fourth Imam and the fifth Imam and the sixth Imam and so on and so forth. You find none of their tests were exactly the same. Never did the same test be presented to one of the Imams that was presented to one of his fathers or one of the children of his who was also an Imam. Very different from each other. When it comes to the life of the sixth Imam, Imam Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, you find his test was also different. Growing up, they used to teach us that the time of Imam Baqir and Imam Sadiq was a time of freedom. There wasn't difficulty. This is why they had the opportunity to sit and teach and preach. When you start to read history, you find that the truth couldn't be further from that. In fact, their time was also a difficult time. It was a time of surveillance. It was a time of monitoring from the Khalifa. And this is why we read in the life of the sixth Imam, so many times obstacles were thrown into his life by the Khalifa of the time. And in fact, this is somewhat even more difficult to deal with, because this is a person who's doing it under a so-called Muslim government. He is supposed to represent the Prophet. He is known, quote unquote, as the Khalifa. And yet he does as he wishes. So the narrations say that when the sixth Imam was in his house in the middle of the day, in the middle of the night, at whatever time that the Mansurs of the world wished and desired, they would send someone to the house of the Imam, summon the Imam. He would tell his people, go and bring Ja'far ibn Muhammad to me in whatever state that you find him in. If he is praying, you bring him to me. If he's sleeping, you bring him to me. In whatever state you find him in. We think the time of Imam Sadiq was an easy time. No, he had tests of his own. Many of the narrations in which the Imam had to perform taqiyya, Otherwise, his own Shia would be slaughtered, relates to the time of the 6th Imam, in fact. This is the type of pressure that the 6th Imam was under. That is why you find sometimes when the representative of the Khalifa used to come to his house and tell him that he has been summoned, he would tell the representative to go back to the Khalifa. And he used to tell him, don't come and enter my house without knocking the door, without letting us know. I have children, I have women. They are scared when you just enter the house like this. This is the ghurba and the loneliness of the 6th Imam. Therefore, you find every single one of our ma'sumeen were tested in their own way and in their own capacity. And the type of tests that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in front of them was never necessarily similar to what He tested the other ma'sumeen with. And this is the foundation to tonight's discussion. That is the discussion on mental health and Islam, because the very crux of this discussion is understanding that the same way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests us sometimes with our physical health and our physical ailments, at other times emotionally, psychologically, in terms of our social well-being, He will test us as well. And this is a test that is referred to as a mental illness. Tonight, inshallah, we'll delve into this topic, and in order to do so, we'll pose the following questions. Number one, how prevalent are mental illnesses in the world today, and in particular in the United States of America, as a country that is highly developed based on economic factors, and a country that we live in? Number two, what does the Quran and Hadith tell us about the different forms and shapes that the tests of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala come in? Number three, when difficulties befall a believer, when difficulties come into the life of a believer, can we walk away with the understanding that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes this person, or that this person must have done something wrong or committed a major sin, and that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing him with this test and putting this difficulty in his life? Or could it be the opposites? Number four, how does Islam teach us to get help from professionals of other sciences when we are in need? Number five, what foundational factors, underlying factors of mental illness does Islam aim to remove from our lives and from our communities? And number six, and finally, what is the one thing that every community member can do, professional or non-professional, can do when they come across another person who might be struggling with their mental health? Tonight, inshallah, we'll delve into these 6 questions with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. If we can please move forward so the brothers can move to the back, inshallah. One more salawat, please. One more salawat, please. Let us begin our discussion from here. When you look at the numbers of individuals based on statistics who deal with mental illnesses and who are impacted by mental illnesses, you'll find a staggering number. Of course, this data and these numbers are based on the United States of America. And there's a reason why this country in particular are the statistics that we want to take a look at, which I will touch on briefly and shortly, inshallah. Based on statistics, 1 in 5 adults, that is 20% of the population of this country, at some point or another has dealt with one form or another of mental illness. That means at one point or another, 20% of the population that you come across has dealt with one form of mental illness or another, of the many forms that it might have. It might be severe anxiety, it might be depression, it might be bipolar disorder, and the list, of course, continues, and many disorders are added as time goes on. And you find the numbers are quite staggering, especially because when you say 20% of people have experienced such a thing, that is talking about the person who is affected by this illness directly, because he is dealing with this illness himself. The reality is, many times when this person is going through this illness, it's not just him that's impacted by this. It's not just him that's affected by this. Maybe this person has this issue, then all of a sudden you find the whole family is impacted by this. And so when you put together all of these numbers, you find there are many in this country who directly or indirectly have dealt with the issue of mental illnesses and are struggling with their mental health. And this is specifically special when we talk about the United States of America, because America and the United States is one of the only well-developed countries in the world that has such terrible statistics when it comes to its mental health rates. You know where you see the results of this terrible state of mental health in the United States? You will see it in the rates of life expectancy of this country. Look at the rates of life expectancy, meaning how long a human being assumes or hopes to live. You will find the United States has one of the lowest numbers amongst all of the other highly developed countries in the world. And it shows us that in this country, though economically and so on and so forth, there's been quite a bit of progress, one of the strongest economies in the world, you can say, but when it comes to this issue, clearly this country is struggling. You find during the pandemic, life expectancy numbers dropped for many countries because of all of the issues that were happening. But immediately after the pandemic, you find all well-developed countries, their numbers started to pick up again, meaning people had hope in a longer life after the pandemic. Except you find the United States has continued to decline even after the pandemic. What does that tell us about the situation that we are living in and the country that we are living in? So if you're watching this somewhere else and you're not living in the United States, the topic is still important. If you're here and you live in this country, then the topic is that much more important for you and I because it impacts our life even more. So what is Islam's take on this issue anyways? How are we supposed to approach this issue? Let us begin from some of the foundational principles that Islam teaches us in this regard. Number one, first principle we have to understand, brothers and sisters, is that Islam is very clear and open about the idea, very frank about the idea that the tests and challenges and obstacles that come your way from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do not show up in one shape or form. There are tests, you and I easily associate them and understand them as a test. Difficulties in life, the moment it happens, people look at it and say, this is a test. Amongst those is a loss of a loved one. These verses that I recited at the beginning, yes, الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. These are verses we quote all the time. Why do we quote these verses? Because when we know someone who goes through the loss of a loved one, we immediately understand this is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No one sits there and says this is a punishment. No one sits there and says this is just your fault, it's their fault. No. So this is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We quote these verses, we understand it. When a person gets into, for example, a car accident, God forbid, it's very easy for you and I to look at that test and say, this is a test, done. But then you find with mental ailments and mental illnesses, it's difficult for you and I to make this correlation. It is difficult for you and I to make this connection. So you will find, and I'll give you this example, and you can see it very clearly in our own communities. If a friend of yours, a relative, God forbid, is in a car accident, then all of a sudden everybody wants to gather around this person. Everybody wants to call them. How are you doing? I hope you're doing well. What happened? Tell me about what happened. Everyone is all ears and eyes to hear what this person has to say. Did you make the wrong turn, or they made the wrong turn, or this happened, or that happened? Then all of a sudden you'll see people come to visit this person. And all of a sudden you'll see they're sending food to his house. Someone steps up, helps with transportation. Someone helps with something else. Someone helps. All of a sudden the community comes together around this person. Because the physical ailment, everybody understands, this is a difficulty he's going through. This is a test he's going through. But now if a person is struggling with their mental health, many times you will find the exact opposite happens. Meaning instead of people coming together and gathering around this person and saying, okay, how can we help? They might sit back, sometimes because we have the wrong intentions, sometimes not because we have the wrong intentions. It depends. They'll sit back and say, this guy is very abnormal, very unusual. I don't want to be around this person. Yeah, he's just the weird one. I don't understand him. Okay, can you be supportive? Can you listen to what's happening? Have you ever asked what's going on? No, no, no. Then all of a sudden you see the same people who are willing to gather around this person with a physical ailment, with that car accident, all of a sudden they're walking away. Then the mental illness that this person had is being exacerbated, it's being made worse by the isolation he feels, by the loneliness that he feels. When you go to Quran and Hadith, they tell us the exact opposite of this. When you go to Quran and Hadith, they tell us that the tests that we're going to put in your life are going to come in all shapes and in all forms. How come when it comes to one shape and one form, you look at it, you say this is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Be patient, brother. You look at the other one, you say, no, this is not a test. This guy is weird. He's unusual. He's abnormal. What did the verse say? The verse said, وَلَنَبْنُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ. We're going to test you with fear. وَالْجُوعُ and hunger. وَنَقْسٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ. The loss of wealth, the loss of lives. وَالثَّمَرَاتِ. The results of your life. We're going to take these away from you. The verse is saying every shape and form that you can possibly think of, we have a test for you in that shape and in that form. But our understanding, no, only certain things are tests from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Other things, your fault. Other things, there's something wrong with you. Hence you find when the companions of Imam al-Baqir, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, and the companion of Imam al-Baqir came to him and he said, I've heard this man, he quotes hadith and he speaks of religion. He has told me that a believer is tested in a number of ways, but there are certain ways a believer is never tested. And amongst those, he mentions leprosy. That's this condition with the skin, yes? لا يبتلى بالجذام ولا بكذا ولا بكذا. A believer won't be tested in these unusual ways. What did Imam al-Baqir tell him? Imam al-Baqir looked at him. He said some of the greatest believers had tests that you and I don't consider to be usual tests. He said, Sahibu Yasin, this character that the Quran talks about, that came to make an attempt to save the Prophet of his time from the disbelievers. He said, Kana mukanna'a. He was born, he didn't have fingers when he was born. The Imam says, as if I can see him and he doesn't have fingers in his hands. This is a test that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in front of him. Do we understand it as a test? You and I don't understand it as a test. Then he continued and he said, Inna al-mu'mina. Know that a believer, yubtala bi kulli baliyatin. A believer will be tested in every possible way you can think of. One person's test is with their child, another person's test is with their husband, another person's test is with their wife, yes? Another person's test is with their husband, yes? Did I say that twice? I don't think that was on purpose. This is just a joke, of course. This person's test is with his health. This person's test is with his wealth. This person's test is with his physical health. This person's test is with his mental health. This is the way it works. The Quran says, La tublawunna. You guys are going to be tested through your wealth, wa anfusikum, and through yourselves. Now, before this, we used to assume that when God tests us bi anfusikum, with ourselves, that means, God forbid, a car is going to hit me and I'm going to die. And we thought this was the only way that's going to happen. Now we understand, no, there's other ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests you, anfusakum, tests you with yourselves. This is the first principle to keep in mind. And if I understand that the tests of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala come in all forms and in all shapes, then when I see someone struggling in a particular way, maybe a way that is unusual for you and I, this is very much possible, but when I see it, I don't walk away, then start to talk about this person. Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is punishing this guy. This is why he's going through this. He must have done something wrong. This is why he's going through this. God doesn't like him. This is why he's going through this. Some of us, if we saw Ayub, the prophet of God, this is what we would tell. This is what we would say about Ayub. Because you look at the life of Ayub, every corner of his life is full of problems. Every corner of the life of Ayub was what? Had issues. There's no corner of this life, no aspect of this life that remained untouched from the tests of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. See, أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الشَّيْطَانُ بِالنُّصْبٍ وَعَذَابٍ. The difficulty is it's very heavy for Ayub to bear this difficulty. And we would sit there and we say, yes, this Ayub, yes, God forbid, na'udhu billah, he must have done something wrong. This is why he's going through this. This is what you and I would say. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us not to underestimate the tests and the difficulties that He puts others through. This is important to understand. And in fact, when you and I come across a person who is going through a test and a difficulty that is unusual meaning it's not necessarily a test that you and I would usually associate as a test and understand as a test. In many cases, it only means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to reward this person more. That's what it means. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that this test is going to be misunderstood. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows many others will look at this person in an unusual manner. When this couple have a child, and then the child, for example, is born with a disability or whatever the case might be, mental or physical. Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that this family, people will look at them a certain way. They will say things, na'udhu billah, God forbid. It's scary. So when you and I come across a family like this, do we look at it and we say, oh, yeah, this is, or are you supposed to look at them and say, you must have done something right that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose you for this test? It's a completely different perspective. I'll never forget, in the Hawza, maybe 3rd or 4th year, I can't remember. We had teachers who used to come in, they had akhlaq sessions, yes? As part of these akhlaq sessions, they used to talk about different things that they thought the students of the Hawza need to build within themselves. Unfortunately, I didn't build any of those that I was supposed to build within myself. Sayyid Hussein maybe, alhamdulillah, a lot more, but me not so much. And I remember the teacher sharing a story with us. He said, I went and visited another scholar. He didn't mention the name of the scholar. And so we were eager to know, because you always wonder when these scholars sit with each other, when two important people sit with each other, you always want to know, what do they talk about? What are they saying? What's going on? Yes, all of this. So we were sitting there in class, very eager to know what happened in this meeting between this scholar, who of course was a student of another great scholar, and the scholar that he was meeting with. So we asked him, we said, so how did that meeting go? What were you guys talking about? Can you share a little bit of what you were talking about? He said, listen, I didn't go there to talk to him about knowledge and this book and that book and all that. I went to visit him because he was struggling. He said, struggling? He's a scholar. He said, yes, he was struggling. And he started to explain the physical ailments that this scholar was going through. And as part of that physical ailment was a condition where slowly the flesh in his body was starting to melt away. And he pointed to us and he said, the scholar I visited, some of the flesh in the front was melting away slowly. And because of that, it was difficult for the family to take care of this person, to provide aid and help for this person and so on and so forth. So you and I come across this ailment that is unusual based on statistics, yes? Are you supposed to look at it and say this person did something wrong? Or are you supposed to look at it and say this person probably did something right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose one of His most difficult tests for him. One of His most difficult tests for her. Islam completely flips the script on this whole situation. Recite a salawat, please. Allahumma salli. So now this person is dealing with this. Okay, I understand it's a test. So what am I supposed to do with a test? Well, it's part of a test. Patience is always a part of it. But this is where we want to get into what Islam tells us to do and how Islam approaches this issue. Now I'm going through this test. So what should I do? Well, Islam, when it came to the Muslims, it didn't come to replace all the other sciences in the world. Islam came to encourage and grow the other sciences in the world. You're dealing with a physical ailment. Never, if you have a broken arm, do you sit at home and say, well, my arm is broken. So what we're going to do is we're going to do Fatiha on it and it'll be fine. I hope you didn't do that. Never, when you have a physical ailment, do you sit there and say, well, I'm going to do this dua and then that's it. I'm not doing anything else. What do? You do these things. Fatiha is recommended. You do all of that. Then you say, okay, well, I have to go find a professional who can help me with this situation. And unfortunately, somehow, some way, it's built into our cultures and our communities that apparently Islam is supposed to have the answer that all of these other sciences are supposed to provide. Somehow, some way, you're supposed to find it from Quran and Hadith only. So then they turn around to this person and they say, yeah, go recite this dua and you'll be fine. They'll make promises that God himself didn't make. Go on Hajj and then inshallah it'll be fine. Go for ziyarah, go visit this person, go visit that, and then inshallah it'll be fine. And Islam says, go for your Hajj, go for your ziyarah, do your nadhr, yes, do your salat, do all of those things. Do your Fatiha. Fatiha is recommended, you should do your amma yujib, and then get some professional help. Because Islam came to grow these other sciences. Look at the impact that Islam had on the Muslim community. When Islam came with the Quran, did everyone sit back and say, oh, alhamdulillah, we have the Quran and we have Hadith. So now we can sit back and then anytime we have an issue, Bismillah, Quran and Hadith will tell us. Was that the impact the Quran made? Or was it the exact opposite when the Quran came into the picture? And when the Imams came into the picture and this culture in the Muslim community built itself, did they start to find or found other sciences? This is what the golden age of the Islamic empire was all about. They started to found other sciences, establish other sciences. Sciences that were already out there, they started to contribute to those other sciences. Quran came, so you grow those other sciences. So you seek those other sciences, not to remove and get rid of those other sciences. You can't tell this person, just be patient, it's okay, go. You tell them, be patient, and then get help as well. And sometimes people will tell you, don't tell someone who's depressed, be patient. No, this is a bad thing. No, it's not a bad thing. It's a bad thing if that's the only thing you are telling him. It's a bad thing if you're trying to replace professional help with just patience. Then yes, it's a terrible thing to do. You need professional help. Islam didn't come to replace all of these sciences. What issue do you have? Let's find a hadith from 1400 years ago from this Imam, who, by the way, we don't even know if it's a reliable hadith, unreliable hadith, what is it not, all of this. Just do this thing, eat this fruit, and then inshallah you'll be fine. No, go look at how our scholars used to deal with things. Which of these great scholars of ours ever, when they reached older age and they were dealing with ailments, which one of them ever sat back and said, yeah, I don't need that professional help. I'll just recite this dua. None of them did this. Every one of these great scholars, including Ayatollah Sistani, find this doctor, that doctor, with the dua, with the Salatul Layl, with the Nadhr, with the Fatiha, with the Amma Yujib, with all of these things that we believe in and we should believe in. But then they were seeking professional help. So you say, okay, then what is the relationship between Islam and mental health then? Then how does Islam help me with my mental health? How is Islam supposed to help me manage my mental health? The role that Islam plays when it comes to your mental health is mainly preventive and much less reactive. It is mainly preventive. Meaning Islam takes a proactive approach to the mental health of its community members. And there is a lot we can do to address the underlying factors that eventually lead to mental health or mental illness in our communities. It's definitely a lot. So you start to take a look at the statistics and the data. What are some of these underlying factors? One of the main underlying factors, and this is not my words, yes, this is just quoting from the data. One of the main underlying factors is a lack of purpose and meaning in your life. One of the main underlying factors is a sense of loneliness and isolation. One of the main underlying factors are childhood traumatic experiences. And hence you will find Islam wants to build a community that foundationally addresses these factors that eventually can lead to these mental illnesses. Yes, here the role of Islam is a very strong role. It is a very active role. Now, if a person is already dealing with this mental illness, then yes, of course, Islam still has some principles to go by, but this person needs professional help. That's the way to go about it. The same way if he had a physical ailment, he would be laughing at anyone if anyone came to him and said, yes, just do this dua and you don't need to go anywhere. Same thing with the physical ailment and the mental ailment as well. And I will say this as I move on, it's not easy to ask for help. It's not easy to come forward and say, I'm struggling with this and it's impacting my life. It's impacting my relationship with my family. It's impacting my studies. It's impacting my well-being. It's not easy. It takes braveness, bravery to do that. But we have to. This is the duty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed on our shoulders. Islam empathizes with a person who's struggling, but has the expectation that this person will take the steps slowly to heal himself, to cure himself. And the first step to that is to ask for help, is to look for help. That's not easy. It's a lot easier said than done. But this is something that we have to do. And if we have the right atmosphere in our community, this inshallah will become easier. We can make it easier with some of the things I'm going to discuss inshallah. You can make that process easier for someone to come and say, I'm struggling with this and I need help on it. So these underlying factors that Islam wants to remove, that are factors that lead to mental illness, what are they? Let's go through some of them so we understand the role that Islam plays, the foundational role that Islam plays to prevent mental illness from becoming prevalent within its community. Recite a salawat, please. Number one, the first thing that Islam will mention is that Islam, and this is something that we usually blame Islam for, we don't give Islam credit for this one. Islam changes your focus and shifts your focus from a life that is only about the 100 years you're going to live here to a life that is 100 years plus infinity. Say, Shaykh, what does that have to do with mental health? You know how many difficulties, injustices, darknesses there are in this world that you cannot even digest unless you are looking towards a hereafter and akhirah. This child is born in this family, not the best of families. This person is born with this disadvantage. Yes, these are the realities of the life that we live in. You are living your life, this person comes and hurts you, God forbid physically, God forbid verbally, whatever the case might be. Okay, so the perpetrator is just out there, you can't necessarily do anything about them. So what happens to all of this? And Islam fundamentally tells you and shifts your focus from a limited worldview to a worldview that includes an afterlife where the perpetrator comes to justice. And if there is no perpetrator, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it up to you. You might be sitting there and saying, this is unfair. Yes, this world is unfair. That's how it is. And you can only cope with it and digest it if there is an afterlife even in the picture. Otherwise, if they came to you and I and they said, this is all there is, a life full of difficulties, unfairness, obstacles. This person is born in a rich family, he has a million opportunities. This person is born in a poor family, no opportunities as well at all. This person is born in a family where substance abuse is already a thing, and the list goes on and on. How are you supposed to make sense of any of this without an afterlife? How are you supposed to make sense of any of this without an akhirah? This is very important. This is number one. Number two, Islam gives a sense of purpose and meaning to your life. You at least know what your life is about. Without a sense of purpose and meaning, the human being is vulnerable to all sorts of issues. When he's searching for that sense of purpose of meaning, if he doesn't find it, then he will hold on to anything that he can to find that sense of purpose and meaning. Then this celebrity will come and tell him, yes, this is how you're supposed to live your life. Yes, fame and this and that and drugs and this and that, and this is it. This is what life is all about. Moving on to number three, and this is the one I want to emphasize more than any of the other ones because the data emphasizes this more than probably any of the other ones. Islam creates a sense of belonging and community. Loneliness and isolation are of the most important factors that lead to mental illness. This is not me, this is the data. Loneliness and isolation. Why do we have all these verses and hadith that say, oh, when you see a person walk in, assume he's better than you? When you see a person, if you can bring happiness to his heart, this much reward and that much reward, and God will save you and this and that. Why do we have narrations that say, when you're dealing with your children, this good akhlaq, that good akhlaq? Why do you think we have narrations that say, when you're treating someone, you can't assume negative things about them? Why do you think we have narrations that say, when you're talking to this person, you can't judge their character? You can judge their actions. There's no problem in that. We've talked about this in detail before. You can't judge their character. Why are these narrations so consistent about, if you mistreat another servant of God, you are in war with God? There's multiple narrations say this. Why? Because Islam wants to build a sense of community and belonging. And if any of these elements are missing, what happens? That community starts to fall apart. Yes, community is not built, brothers and sisters, based on just we did Eid Salat and there were 1,000 people or 200 people or 50 people or whatever. That's one part of it. That's an important part of it. But what makes or breaks a community is how they treat one another, how they speak to one another, how they look at one another. Sometimes a look, and all of a sudden you see this person 10 years later. Where have you been in the past 10 years? I came, this is how I was treated. I'm not justifying this approach, I'm just sharing how it is. I came, I was treated in this way. I'm not stepping in this place again. Okay, well, you're not stepping in this place. It's going to impact your life. A sense of community and belonging. If a human being loses a sense of community and belonging, and he doesn't know how to identify in a world where everyone is struggling to figure out how they're going to identify, if he loses that, then he's going to identify with something or someone. He's going to find someone or something to fill that void. Doesn't matter what it is. Somehow, some way he's going to find, because this is how the human being is created. Human being is social by nature. He's always looking for a community. This is why Islam says, when my servant comes to you, if you disrespect him, man ahana li waliyan, if someone disrespects a friend of mine, a servant of mine, faqad barazani bil muharaba, he has declared war against me. Hadith Qudsi says this. Why? Because Islam wants to build a sense of community and belonging. These are the underlying factors we have to pay attention to. Moving on to the next one. The next of those, and this is extremely important, brothers and sisters, look at the attention that Islam gives to making the house a place of peace and tranquility, and not a place of chaos and disorder. This is a problem. This one is a problem we have. The moment the house becomes a place of chaos and disorder, it becomes turbulence. It becomes this one is yelling, that one is yelling. Every second, this person comes and says, why did you do this? Why didn't you do that? What are you doing right now? What are you going to do 5 minutes later? This, that. Then the individuals in this family have now opened themselves up to all sorts of issues that will come their way. Why does Islam have so much emphasis on, if you go in your house, you look at your parents with a smile, all of a sudden we'll give you this much reward? None of these are arbitrary. None of these are haphazard. It's not like God is just choosing one day, like, oh, I like this thing, I'm just going to put a lot of reward for it. It has a lot of reward because there's a lot of maslaha in it. It has a lot of reward because it impacts your life in a positive way, in a heavy positive way. Why does Islam say you come home and you see your children and you show good akhlaq to your children, and I will forgive some of your sins? Why does Islam emphasize this so much? Why does Islam come back to the issue of family so much? Because without family, now the doors open up to so many issues. Why does Islam emphasize the issue of marriage so much? Because of this. Because these are underlying factors. Before this person goes all the way to the point where now he needs professional help, and if that is the case, then we have to find him professional help. But before he gets all the way to that point, Islam is trying to address these underlying issues. You say, well, these underlying issues aren't too important. We just have to treat that person all the way at that point. No, that's a society you already live in. That formula, that algorithm doesn't work. You're seeing it in front of you today. How many billions of dollars is spent every single year in this country? 190 billion, something of this sort, on just mental health. So is the mental health getting better, or is it getting worse? Or, well, the numbers tell you it's getting worse by a lot. Just only getting worse and worse as we go. Why? Because there's underlying factors. It's traumatic experiences that this child went through. You're forgetting about that underlying factor when the father used to come into the home, the mother used to come into the home, his body was trembling at the age of 7. And the only thing you're paying attention to is, well, now that he is dealing with, for example, this addiction or that addiction or whatever, well, we have to solve that. That's the society we live in. The underlying factors are given no importance at all. No, this issue is a very important issue. Islam wants this household to be a place of peace and tranquility. If someone does that, then they have automatically protected themselves from a lot of things. There's no guarantees in life. No guarantees in life. You can put on 54 seatbelts, and still what might happen? You might still end up in an accident, God forbid. Yes? But you have to do your part. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us. This is why in the house, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put so much emphasis on this. Yes, if you come home and you just tell your spouse that you love them, I will reward you for that. Baba, I didn't do anything. It's fine, I'll reward you. Why? Because the foundations of this household are getting stronger every day. Now, this is a household that when one of them starts to struggle with some issues, everyone will come to their help. We'll move on to the next foundational factor. Recite a salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. The next of those that, again, based on the data, points to being a factor that leads to mental illness is a negative way of looking at the world. Negative thoughts. How much does the Quran tell you and I? How much does Hadith tell you and I? When things happen in life, don't assume the worst case scenario. And I will be extremely realistic with you because I'm a very realistic person. I'm not a poetic person. Those of you who know me, I'm not very, spiritual, irfani, everything is fine, all this. I'm not like that. I'm very practical. When Islam tells you to not think the worst in every situation, the reality is you don't know. It might be actually the worst situation. This comment that was made by your relative, this lady said this guy said this, all of this. Islam says think positively. Isn't it possible that really they had evil intentions, they meant to hurt you, they meant to do? Yes, 100%. That's the real possibility. And Islam tells you still you should think positively. You don't know? That's fine. Sometimes you'll never know in your life, actually. Sometimes someone will treat you a certain way. You'll never know in your life, was this person really struggling internally and they treated me this way? Or did they really hate my guts and they were treating me this way? Sometimes you'll never know in your life. It's the reality of life. Sometimes it'll never come to light what the reality of the matter was. And Islam will tell you, think positively. Make 70 excuses. Now, when it's something important that's impacting your life on an ongoing basis, you have to investigate, you have to ask, you have to do this, you have to do that, all of that, yes? We're talking about things in passing and so on and so forth. Minor things that can ruin your day. Islam will tell you to think positively. And we'll move on to one of the final ones. And that is to be grateful and thankful for the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what the data shows. That a human being who thinks like this and lives this lifestyle is less prone to mental illnesses. So you say, Sheikh, okay, I get it. All of these foundational things that Islam wants us to work on. But now I'm dealing in a community. There's individuals who are struggling with their mental health. What is something I can do? Immediate. Those are all foundational. Makes sense. Those are all important. but immediate. This is the one thing you can do. If you're a professional, not a professional, know a lot about mental health, you don't know a lot about mental health, all of this, every single one of us sitting here, everyone who's watching, it doesn't matter, you can do this. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants this from us. You can at least be a person who is willing to offer aid and assistance. You can at least be a resource to at least point this person in the right direction. At the very, very least, you can sit there and listen to the struggle that this person has. This every single one of us can do. At least you can sit and listen and hear the struggle that he is speaking of. Instead of dismissing it, instead of quickly chalking it up to, oh, you're being unthankful, God isn't happy with you talking like this, God doesn't want you to speak about your difficulties like this, so on and so forth. Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't want us to take our difficulties and announce it to thousands of people. He doesn't want this. But in private, on a one-on-one base, so on and so forth, someone who might be able to help me, you can be that ear that hears this person. And this person might walk away with, at least someone understands me. At least someone gets it. Sometimes you listening without being dismissive, without being judgmental, while being understanding, can be the difference between life and death. Go look in mental health aid courses when they teach you how to be an aid to someone who might be struggling. This is one of the things that they teach you. Can you sit there and listen and be empathetic, show empathy to the struggle that this person is going through? And I can tell you from personal experience, because that's part of what I do, this is extremely powerful. It's extremely powerful. At the very least, I can be that person who listens carefully. And this is what you also find, interestingly, in the seerah of our sixth Imam, Imam Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. The sixth Imam was known for this by his enemies, that when we used to come and debate with him, he used to sit there, quiet, put his head down, just listen to what we had to say. And Ibn Abil Awjah, this atheist, he used to say, tell the other companions of the sixth Imam, you guys are not like him. Because when we sit with him and we talk to him, he puts his head down, he listens so carefully. So much so that we think we already won the debate. He's already lost. That's why he's quiet. But he's not quiet because of that. He's quiet because he's listening carefully. This is something every single one of us can do. And especially when it comes to our younger generation, brothers and sisters, because the statistics tell us that 70%, 75% of mental illnesses will present themselves before the age of 24. That's 75%. And hence we have to understand that the difficulties that come our way, the tests that come our way, they come in all forms and in all shapes. And amongst those difficulties and amongst those tests is the masa'ib and the difficulties of our beloved sixth Imam. Sallallahu alayka ya Ja'far ibn Muhammad. The narration says, the narration says that Imam Sadiq, during his lifetime, so many occasions, the Khalifa used to summon him. And in some of those narrations, the Imam used to complain to the Khalifa and he used to object to the Khalifa. How dare you come into my house whenever you like? How dare you have the hearts of my women and children tremble, and you smash the door down and you walk into my house and you see the ghurba and the loneliness of the sixth Imam, who sometimes had nothing that he could do to protect his family against this work of the khulafa. And the other masa'ib and difficulties that the sixth Imam used to go through, the pains and difficulties that he used to go through, and how many times did the khulafa call him from one city to another city. And in some narrations it says that the person who came to take the Imam pulled the clothing of the Imam forcefully to take him to the Khalifa. This is the loneliness and the ghurba of Imam as-Sadiq. And in this difficult life, and in this painful life, the narrations tell us that then Imam as-Sadiq was given poison by the Khalifa of the time. And the narration says the poison started to work its work and do its work on the body of Imam as-Sadiq. This man who so many Muslims, Shia and Sunni and otherwise, benefited from his knowledge and benefited from his classes. His companions say we came to visit him in those final days, and we saw almost from his body, the only thing that is left is his head. It's almost the rest of the body has started to melt away in front of us. The body is going pale, almost no more strength in his body. The narration says we started to cry in the presence of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, and as we cried and cried, he turned to me and he said, don't cry, because everything that God chooses for a believer is good for him. If he chooses something good for him, it will be good for him. If he chooses something difficult for him, it will be good for him. And the narration says in those final days, he took advantage of that time to do his final wasiyah and to do his final wills in those moments. The servant in his house says, even during those final moments of his life, when he was fainting from the pain of the poison and he was coming back over and over again, he was giving from his wealth to his relatives. And when they asked him, Ya Ja'far ibn Muhammad, why are you doing this? He said, even in these final moments, I want to do Silatul Rahim. And I want to show kindness to those relatives of mine, even though they mistreated me while I was alive. But I want to show kindness to them. And the narration says, as the final moments of the life of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq came, then all of a sudden he gathered all of his family. And his wife narrates that when the whole family was gathered and his eyes were closing and opening, he started to cry. And we started to cry because he was crying. And he opened his eyes and he said, let this be the final thing that I tell you. And one of my final wasiyas to all of you, he said, know that the one who takes salat lightly, our shafa'ah and our intercession will not reach this person. And all of a sudden the eyes of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq are closed, and the body of this man who so many benefited from is lying there in a lifeless manner, in a cold manner. Imam al-Kadhim says, I brought 2 kafans, I brought 2 pieces of cloth and made that the kafan of my father. These were pieces of cloth that my father used to do hajj in, he used to do ihram in. I brought these 2 basic cloths and started to do the kafan of my father. And we tell Imam al-Kadhim that on this day and on this night, as you are going through this musibah, O Imam al-Kadhim, there was a grandfather of yours, there was a great-grandfather of yours who dealt with a difficulty so much greater. La yawm ka yawmika ya Aba Abdullah. There's no day like the day of Karbala. Oh Imam al-Kadhim, there was a time where there wasn't even a kafan for Hussein on the 10th of Muharram. And the history tells us that Hussein, in those final moments, as all have gone to the battlefield and his heart has already been wounded so many times, Ali and al-Akbar has already gone to the battlefield, and Qasim has already gone, and Abul Fadl Abbas has already gone, and even Ali and al-Asghar has already gone. The narration says Hussein made his way into the tent of the women and the children. And many were wondering, why is Hussein coming to us in these final moments? What is Hussein coming here to ask for? All of a sudden he turned to Zainab. He said, Zainab, Itini, give me a piece of clothing that has holes in it. Give me a piece of clothing that is worthless. Give me a piece of clothing that no one would ever want to take away from the battlefield with them. Ya Hussein, why are you doing this in these final moments? What is your intention? They gave the cloth to Hussein. And Hussein took this cloth and then he started to tear it up even more. And he started to make more holes in it. Oh Hussein, why are you doing this? He said, on the 10th of Muharram today, they will not have mercy to anything. And when they see my body on the ground, they will try to come and take everything. They will take everything in the tents and they will attack the women and the children. I want to wear this piece of cloth so that it remains as my kafan on my body, so that it is so valueless, so that they will leave it on my body, so my body is not laying out there without a kafan. This is the ghurba and the loneliness of Hussein. What went through the heart of Zainab? What went through the heart of Kulthum as they watched their father walk away towards this battlefield? They watched their brother walk away towards this battlefield. In front of him, an ocean of an army. No matter what Hussein does, his blood is going to be shed on this day. Oh, Imam al-Kadhim, we send our condolences for your musibah and the musibah of your great-grandfather, Imam al-Hussein. Ala la'natullah ala al-qawmi al-zalimin. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. ماتم حسين. يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين
Ya Hussein, 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 काज़ू उठा रहे हैं जाफर का जनाजा काज़म उठा रहे हैं जाफर का जनाजा काज़म उठा रहे हैं फर का जनाजा हाय हुसैन कह के आंसू बहा रहे हैं काज़म उठा रहे हैं जाफर का जनाजा काज़म उठा रहे हैं जाफर का जनाजा हाय हुसैन कह के आंसू बहा रहे हैं काज़म उठा रहे हैं जाफर का जनाजा काज़म उठा रहे हैं काज़म उठा रहे हैं ताबूत को उठा के जितने कदम बढ़ाए हर एक कदम पे उनको सजाद याद आए अबे की बेबसी का नौहा सुना रहे हैं काज़म उठा रहे हैं जाफर का जनाजा काज़म उठा रहे जाफर मंसूर ने ग़िज़ा में ज़हर जफ़ा दिया था मज़लूम के बदन पे जिसका असर हुआ था अफलाक से मलाइक पुरसे को आ रहे हैं काज़म उठा रहे हैं जाफर का जनाजा काज़म उठा रहे हैं निकला दहन से बाहर हाय जिगर जो कट के खून रंग हो गया था मौला का मेरे बिस्तर मज़े ये दिल के दिल को दुखा रहे हैं काज़म उठा रहे हैं जाफर का जनाजा काज़म उठा रहे हैं जाफर का जनाजा निकला दहन से बाहर हाय जिगर जो कट के खून रंग हो गया था मौला का मेरे बिस्तर मज़े ये दिल के का जनाजा काज़िम का जनाजा हैदर से दुश्मनी ये अब तक नहीं रुकी है मौला हसन से लेकर जाफर तक आ गई है हर एक चिराग ज़हरा जालिम बुझा रहे हैं काज़िम उठा रहे हैं जाफर का जनाजा काज़िम उठा रहे हैं जनाजा औलाद सैयदा में ऐसा है ये जनाजा जिसमें मदीने वाले देने को आए पुरसा अहले मदीना सारे ये गम मना रहे हैं काज़िम उठा रहे हैं जाफर का जनाजा काज़िम उठा रहे हैं का जनाजा सलमान और मीसो देखा ये ख्वाब अक्सर बाद ज़हूर मौला महदी बदी में आके ज़हरा का रोज़ा बना रहे हैं काज़िम उठा रहे हैं जाफर का जनाजा काज़िम उठा रहे हैं जाफर का जनाजा कर मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद सलावत
Momineen, can I request you to please settle down? We would like to request our representative from Al Ain Foundation, Brother Ali Hassan Ali. He is the Executive Director of Al Ain Social Care Foundation and would like to share the progress that this foundation is making and their current programs in the U.S. With this, I would like to hand the mic over to Brother Ali. Bar Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Sheikh Mahdi Rastani, the management of CFK, my elders, my brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum. I wanted to thank you for your patience. I will be out of your way. I promise you, in line with Imam Sadiq's wasiyah, we'll be in line. I'll be out of your way before Salat starts. Inshallah, I would like to just speak to you and come to you with humble gratitude to begin with. And first of all, my condolences to our 12th Imam and to all of you on the death anniversary of Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam. Allahumma salli. I come to you as the current executive director of Al Ain Social Care Foundation. I am also the immediate past president, two-term past president of Shia Isnasi Jamaat of New York, also known as Sijni, and Al Mahdi Islamic Center. Al Ain, I'm sure a lot of you already know about Al Ain. Al Ain is a foundation that was initiated by Ayatollah Sayyid Sistani himself, may Allah prolong his life. It was initiated in the height of the days when ISIS was running rampant in Iraq, and it was created as a documentation project, hence the name Al Ain, which is the watching eye. What created as a byproduct of that was the orphan children that got created, and Today, the organization is a 501c3 here in the USA, and it supports close to 96,000 children who are sponsored. The goal of this organization, and believe me, none of this will be possible without supporters such as yourself, not just financially, but your du'as as well. The goal of this organization is not to be an orphanage. In line with Sheikh's lecture today and the wisdom he imparted, the importance of mental health and the importance of education. Imam Sadiq is known for imparting that knowledge. That is the fundamental thing that he is known for. And what Al-Ain prides itself on is empowering these children, who some of them who have literally seen their parents shot in front of their faces. And imagine the mental health stat that would come out of that, and what it takes for that child to kind of just focus on education and to come back to bearing. Some of these children are actually the eldest surviving child, which means that they're responsible for the financial health of that family. So what we do is, through your support, we provide sponsorship for these children that provides everything that child needs to basically survive on his or her feet. It provides them the psychological help, covers them their monthly stipend for their house, it covers them for their educational support, anything that child needs, basically to just focus on education. And as you can see here, the bottom part here, this basically covers what our mission is, what our goal is. We have centers built across Iraq today. And by the way, the organization is not just focusing on Iraq, it's expanding to Afghanistan, to Ghana in West Africa, to Yemen soon, inshallah, and soon Pakistan as well. The goal here is to essentially keep spreading the wings of Al-Ain globally under the supervision of Sayyid Sistani. On a regular basis, he keeps getting updates, and there is complete oversight. 100% of what you give, Mu'min, 100% goes to the orphan children. There is 0% admin fee. We don't keep a cut. All of our expenses are bared by specific donors who donate just for the admin cost. So if you give $100 today, it is 100% going to go to the orphan children. Now, one thing I'll tell you, as we commemorate the sixth Imam Shahadat, I'm going to leave you this line right here. How many times have we recited this line in Ziyarati Ashura? How many times have we recited in Muharram? In a couple of months, we will be reciting this over and over again. We were not blessed, Mu'mineen, to be in that era. We were not blessed to be one of the 72. Neither we were blessed to be those who survived after that, right? But I will tell you one thing. If you had an opportunity to be in that position, would you take it? I'm assuming the answer is going to be yes. Now, while we were not here during this era, keep in mind, centuries later, the children of the same family, Bani Umayyah, recreated that same mischief in the same land in the name of ISIS. And this time, Mu'mineen, we have it upon ourselves to take on that mantle and to literally live this line. And to, as we just left the month of Ramadan, and the month where Imam Ali is known as the father of the orphan children. And this is our opportunity of assisting in any way you can. If you cannot contribute financially, please reach out to us. We are looking for assistance, volunteers. We are looking for paid opportunities as well. Please reach out to us. We have representatives here. These are just a few things that the center provides to the orphan children. We basically provide psychological rehab counseling, healthcare services, vocational training, distribution of hall for orphan and families. Basically, every child in their family receives this right now. And Mu'mineen, this is all the different ways where you can help. One thing I'll tell you is Al-Ain is the only organization that has the blessing of Sayyid Sistani of Sadaqah Makbutha, which means receive charity. We all know that charity is, you only can reap the benefit of charity once that individual receives it in their hand. Sayyid Sistani has given Al-Ain the decree that once you contribute towards Al-Ain through Sadaqah, either through the Sadaqah box that you can request, or we have an app. You can search for the app right now and you can give Sadaqah. And immediately as you give it, it is considered a Sadaqah Makbutha and it is, you reap the rewards right away. Mu'mineen, the least you can do is, we're requesting you to please download the app. You can contribute in many ways. You can even request a physical Sadaqah box. And we have representatives here, Brother Furat. Furat, can I ask you to please come forward here? We have Brother Furat over here, who is our male representative. I'm going to request Sister Fatima Khalfan, who I believe is somewhere in the back in the ladies section, for her to stand so people can see her. She's right there. Please reach out to these individuals for any assistance you can provide, and we will be grateful and thank you for your support. I will leave you with one last line. This is from a former community leader to this community. What these four walls, as a president of a past community, these four walls may be a house. But however, what this community has done is you have created these four walls into a home. And when I say this, I have a 16-year-old at home who in New York, who cannot wait for your programming here and to listen to this gem of a person you have here. Because this individual is creating ripples through your community, throughout the world. So please don't think that these are just four walls. What you guys are doing as a community, mashallah, is absolutely commendable, and it is a living example of what a thriving community should do. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all, and thank you again, as always, for opening your doors to Al-Ain. You have always been supportive to Al-Ain. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair. Brothers and sisters, if you'd like to prepare for Salat, we'll continue with Salat and Maghrib and Isha and Jama'at, inshallah.
Just a quick note, there will be the recitation of Ziyarat Warith at the end of the Salat. Just a quick reminder, inshallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح، حي على خير العمل، حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله، لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. صلى محمد وعلى محمد. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. صلى وأن عليا حجة الله صلى الله وسلامه عليه. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح، حي على خير العمل، حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد، الله الصمد، لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده، سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد، الله الصمد، لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة وبعد المعصية. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده، سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وتقبل شفاعته وارفع درجته. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقوم. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. سبحان الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل. لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والنجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنة والرضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. اللهم صل على محمد. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وأن عليا حجة الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. حي على خير العمل. حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة. قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة وبعد المعصية. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وتقبل شفاعته وارفع درجته. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Inshallah, before we do the dua, ziyarat warith, let's take a moment also to recite Surah Al-Fatiha for all of your marhumin and marhumat, especially the marhum that who the majlis was sponsored in their name, marhum Muhsin Maklai. And keep in mind all the marhumin of the Maklai and Aladina family, as well as your marhumin and marhumat, with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil faraj. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نويت أزور سيدي ومولاي بعبد الله الحسين نيابة عني وعن والدي وأهل بيتي ووالد والدي ومن قلدني الدعاء والزيارة طاعة قربة إلى الله تعالى. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح النبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام ولي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأصلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة، لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها. واشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. واشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرضي الزكي الهادي المهدي. واشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. واشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياء ورسله إني بكم مؤمن وبيابكم موقن، بشرائع ديني وخواتيم عملي، وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. بأبي أنت وأمي يا ابن رسول الله، بأبي أنت وأمي يا أبا عبد الله. لقد عظمت الرزية وجلت المصيبة بك علينا وعلى جميع أهل السماوات والأرض، فلعن الله أمة أسرجت وألجمت وتهيأت لقتالك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله. قصدت حرمك وأتيت إلى مشهدك، أسأل الله بالشأن الذي لك عنده وبالمحل الذي لك لديه أن يصلي على محمد وآل محمد، وأن يجعلني معكم في الدنيا والآخرة. السلام على رسولنا الكريم خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين. السلام على علي بن أبي طالب أمير المؤمنين. السلام على فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام على الحسن بن علي المجتبى. السلام على الحسين بن علي الشهيد. السلام على علي بن الحسين السجاد. السلام على محمد بن علي الباقر. السلام على جعفر بن محمد الصادق. السلام على موسى بن جعفر الكاظم. السلام على علي بن موسى الرضا. السلام على محمد بن علي الجواد. السلام على علي بن محمد الهادي. السلام على الحسن بن علي العسكري. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، يا إمامي وإمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل مخرجك واجعلنا من أعوانك وأنصارك. السلام عليكم أئمتي وسادتي، أسأل الله بالشأن الذي لكم عنده وبالمحل الذي لكم لديه أن يصلي على محمد وآل محمد، وأن يرزقنا في الدنيا زيارتكم وفي الآخرة شفاعتكم. وفي العام صلى على محمد وآل محمد.